All right, guys, we better get into the main event. I did not expect to go this long before getting into our main video. However, it's time for everybody's favorite reacting to Oversimplified, reacting to YouTube history channels. Everybody loves these videos. They always tend to do well on our channel. These history videos, these nonsense history videos, bourgeois history videos, where they have like they're well produced and they have cartoons and graphics, and you can tell that quite a bit of money was spent to produce them. They're extremely popular and they're extremely effective in implanting people's brains, especially young people, with a very bourgeois, very imperialist narrative about history and about world history and world events. So I think it is worthwhile to go through these and debunk them, explain the communist version of history to people, which is the realistic version of history, the version of history actually rooted in evidence and material analysis. So this should be an interesting one. We've got the Oversimplified channel here, who we've reacted to before, and they are talking about the Russian Revolution. So let's see their oversimplified explanation. Possibly the greatest event in human history. Pop history, yeah, that's what I call what these guys do.
By NordVPN. Click on the link in the description below to get an amazing 68% off a 2-year plan. Also, commemorating the weirdest bromance in history. Get your new character pins and Russian Revolution merch available now. Link down below. Hey Jimmy, it's the 1800s, an exciting time to be alive. Why don't you get out there and explore the world? Gee whiz, Mom, thanks. This place is amazing. Where am I? Why, you're in France, my boy. Here we come up with wacky new ways of running a country. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Whoa, welcome to the United Kingdom.
Based French Revolution?
Here we invented the train. Whoa, aboard! Holy smokes! You're in a German factory, my friend. Here we harness fire and coal to create all these sexy lederhosen. This is incredible. I can't wait to see where I'll end up next. Where am I? You're in Russia. Have I gone back in time? No, this is just how it is. Are you a farmer? Worse. Technically, my landlord owns me, which makes me a serf. I'm scared. You should be, because I haven't eaten in 4 days, and you look pretty tasty. Hey!
So far, based. All right, that was a good way of explaining the difference between the West European countries and Russia at the time. West European countries, industrialization, capitalism is setting on, feudalism is in its last, legs, are pretty much fully abolished by this point, actually. By the time Lenin comes about, feudalism's basically done, and the bourgeois mode of production has fully established itself in West Europe. England is the hub of industry. France doesn't have as much industry, but they have a giant financial sector, all these giant banks, much more commerce and development than Russia. And Russia is still a semi-feudal country. Capitalism is emerging, but they're like 200 years behind. It's a semi-feudal country, or a majority feudal country, with all these peasants who, as they said, were basically owned by the landlord.
Jimmy, how are your travels? I hate you! Russia in the 19th century, feudal, underdeveloped, and stuck in the past. While the rest of Europe had been modernizing and improving their citizens' lives, Russia's rulers were taking a different approach. My lord, we're falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars had no time for pathetic ideas.
Bruh, that was awesome. So far, this video is great.
Falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars.
Finally, an accurate representation of how the Tsarists reacted to people who wanted development. If you listen to Russian nationalists or like Russian monarchists, they'll tell you that Stalin did nothing, Lenin did nothing, Russia was developing like that anyways. But more honest historians, even anti-communist historians, will tell you, no, the Tsars were absolutely holding the country back, sending the Russian people to fight and die in these endless wars of conquest, spending all of their money on these stupid wars as the rest of the world was developing and industrializing, and Russia was lagging behind. The Tsars were absolutely a complete fetter on the development of Russian society and the Russian economy. No bazooka technology at the time. True, ahistorical. There were no bazookas
Czars had no time for pathetic ideas like liberty and modernization because they were too busy having the time of their lives. While the serfs were breaking their backs in the fields, the Tsars held all the power, and they didn't have to listen to anyone. Want to run the country like a backwards feudal kingdom while the rest of Europe outpaces you militarily and economically? Go right ahead. Want to keep the people uneducated so they don't get any ideas? There's no one to stop you. Want to keep...
You know what's funny? This is what's happening to the US now with China. China's outpacing us because they have this more advanced economic system, because they have more advanced relations of production, and the US is lagging behind. As the ruling class parties it up, the country continues to decay, the infrastructure decays, the people fall further into poverty. We continue to lose these foreign engagements overseas. Countries in Africa are having coups and throwing out all of their, Western military occupiers. People are turning against Israel and beginning to side with Palestine. The empire's in decay, and Wall Street and the ruling class, as they always do historically in revolutionary times, are just partying it up. Doing let them eat cake. Totally disconnected from the plight of the working people on the ground. So it was the same thing in Russia. You had the czars partying it up while they were holding the country back, while feudal relations of production and the monarchy completely held the country back and allowed all these other countries with more advanced relations of production to surpass them. Because if, for those who are new to Marxism, Marxism isn't just, anti-capitalist full stop. It is anti-capitalist. I almost hesitate to say that because it is anti-capitalist and a, systematic critique of the capitalist mode of production. But Marxism recognizes that capitalism was a step forward out of feudalism and slavery. The French Revolution was a bourgeois revolution. The capitalist class, with the help of the working classes, overthrew the monarchs, and feudal relations of production, peasant, serf, landlord relations of production, were replaced with capitalist relations, wage labor capitalist, which was an advancement and which allowed these countries to industrialize and develop faster. But the mistake that people make is thinking that the capitalist system is eternal, that eventually the capitalist system won't also be outdated and outmoded by new relations of production, which is what China understands that the US doesn't, which now puts us in a situation like Tsarist Russia, where the ruling class is partying it up as the whole country decays, because we have backwards relations of production, which have been outmoded by the development of the means of production.
Keep exporting grain even when there's a massive famine causing hundreds of thousands to die? That is your God-given right. While all of this was great for the Tsar, if you were literally anybody else, it probably sucked because Russia was falling behind. If they were to keep up with Europe, they'd need a strong ruler with some big ideas. Oh look, here comes one now. Hey everyone, it's me, Tsar Alexander II, and I've got some big news. I'm releasing you all from your serfdom. You're all free. Yes! Yep, I'm the best. Oh, there is one thing though. I spoke to your local lords and they weren't happy about losing all their free labor. So as a compromise, you're all gonna have to pay them back a near impossible amount of money for the next 49 years. Expect your lives to barely change. Okay, bye.
Shout out to the people who say that the Tsar ended feudalism. It wasn't Lenin and Stalin who ended feudalism, it was the Tsar. It wasn't Lenin and Stalin who industrialized, it was the Tsar. They learned from their mistakes and started taking Russia forward. And we need to bring them back. No. They were pressured to do a symbolic ending of feudalism by class struggle. Right, all of the discontent with the monarchy that existed among the peasants and among the people forced the Tsar to make this symbolic gesture against feudalism and more symbolic gestures towards industrialization. But as the video explained, it wasn't a real abolition of feudalism, a real reinvestment in industrialization, the way that the Bolsheviks did. It was just trying to give lip service to the peasants who were super angry about the current situation, which is how political change always comes about, right? This is Marxist theory as opposed to great man theory. It wasn't just the Tsar deciding to do this one day. It was the class struggle and the material conditions that forced the Tsar to change his position towards more industrialization and less feudal relations of production.
Now I know what you're thinking. This Tsar Alexander II seems like a pretty cool guy. He's trying to reform the country and get Russia on the right path. Everyone must love this guy, right? Wrong. Why does one man get to decide the fate of everyone in the country? This whole system is dumb. Somebody should do something. Like what? Like kill the Tsar. You're gonna kill the Tsar? Well, me? No. I'm busy. I was kind of hoping you'd do it. Okay, see? The people love me. They're throwing flowers, confetti, and high-grade explosions.
Is that Trotsky? Why is Trotsky bombing the Tsar? Or is that Lenin's brother who was hung for trying to assassinate the Tsar?
Okay, Nicholas, your grandfather has a mild case of being blown up by a terrorist, and he's not looking too hot. So we're gonna go say our goodbyes, okay? No, it'll be too scary for him. Nonsense, it won't be scary at all. We're just gonna say...
Why did they make him look like Trotsky? That's just confusing.
a quick goodbye. Ready?
Boy, look at me. The people did this to me. And one day, they'll do it to you!
See? Wasn't scary at all. So Alexander II was dead, but luckily, they had another Alexander lying around, Alexander III, and he felt his dad's reforms had weakened the Tsar's authority. Russia was massive, and as a result, had many ethnic minorities. Non-Russians? More interested in their own cultural heritage than in loving me? Isn't it great? So much...
Oh, it was Alexander III who Lenin's brother tried to assassinate? Okay, yeah. It just confused me because they made the assassin look like Trotsky. I don't know why they did that, but maybe they ran out of little figures to use and just repurposed the Trotsky one. It was anarchist, yeah. Go figure.
Beautiful culture and diversity in our great nation. Alexander thought all these minorities should be a little more Russian, and thereby loyal to him. So he repressed religious minorities. He repressed non-Russians. He introduced the Okhrana, a secret police force that repressed anybody who thought having a czar was dumb. If Alexander...
What? But I thought the communists brought secret police forces to Russia. I thought it was only the KGB.
II was the great reformer. Alexander III was the great repressor. Now that's how you run a country. Hey, Dad? Ugh, great. It's my son Nicholas, who I like to call a girly girl because he's so weak and pathetic. When are you gonna grow up? You still look like a girly girl to me. But Dad, I grew a beard. Yeah, an ugly girly girl beard. If Nicholas was to one day be czar, he needed his dad to teach him how to run the country. But his dad instead suggested that Nicholas go somewhere else. So Nicholas went to Japan, got an edgy dragon tattoo, had his head sliced off by a policeman, and then came home. Now will you teach me how to rule? I suppose it's time. Okay, there's a lot you need to know before becoming czar. Uh-oh. What? I've got kidney inflammation.
Thank you, JS, for the membership. Appreciate you, comrade. Enjoy the perks that come with being a Midwestern Marx member.
Oh, no. Upon his father's death, a totally unprepared Nicholas II ascended to the Russian throne. He wasn't a reformer like his grandfather, nor was he a repressor like his dad. Nicholas was Nicholas. Timid, easily swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this. Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself...
What the hell was that? I never seen those pictures before.
Wasn't ready to rule, and he himself swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this.
What in the world is going on here?
Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself admitted it, saying, I'm not yet ready to be czar. I know nothing of the business of ruling. Bit of an awkward time to bring it up. However, Nicholas firmly believed that he was chosen by God to be Russia's big daddy. And while he doubted his ability to rule, he was going to give it his best shot. And hey, who knows? Maybe he wouldn't be so bad after all. To get things off to a good start, Nicholas promised free pretzels and beer to a huge crowd in Moscow to celebrate his coronation, so enticing a proposition to starving peasants that the ensuing stampede left nearly 1,500 people dead. What the hell happened? We're not sure, but you're scheduled to go party with the French at 8 o'clock. Shouldn't I stay here out of respect for the people? When have Russian czars ever...
So he was Travis Scott before Travis Scott. He threw a concert and there was a crowd crush and a bunch of people died. Sounds like Travis Scott's Astro World tour in Russia.
Respected the people. Nicholas's decision to go party with the French immediately tarnished his image. Some were calling him Nicholas the Bloody. The Tsar's...
Yeah, it is a stupid art direction, but I'm not gonna lie, the bazooka scenes and the scenes of Tsar Nicholas crying all made me laugh pretty hard. And the scene where Alexander I got bombed, all of those were kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. But you're right, it's tacky. We need Travis Scott ACP World. Yeah, I don't know if that would be good optics except for the crowd crush, but whatever, I'd be down. I get those goosebumps every time.
had been partying hard at the expense of the people for long enough. They'd emancipated the serfs, but failed to lift them out of poverty. They used their secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they'd failed.
You got the serfs sleeping on the roof. That's kind of funny. Sleeping on the roof. I don't know. Maybe I'm easily amused.
Secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they'd failed to modernize and give the people rights, something the rest of Europe had begun doing over a century ago. The rule of the Tsars was quickly becoming outdated, and more Russians began wondering if there was a better way. For many, the solution was simple. Just look to the West. Republics, democracies, and constitutional monarchies galore. But a small growing group rejected that for an even better idea, a little something they called communism. Take Vladimir Lenin, an intelligent member of Russia's middle class.
Beast!
And also, a massive ill-tempered jerk. If you disagreed with him about anything, he wasn't afraid to call you out. You fat-headed, simple-minded vapid.
Sounds like being honest. Sounds like doing what nobody can do in liberal bourgeois society, where we're taught to not actually talk about disagreements. You're actually literally taught never talk about religion and politics, right? It's impolite because we don't know how to have disagreements and actually have substantive discussions where we stand on business. And that was Lenin's whole thing. He was honest, right? He was honest with people about his criticisms. That doesn't mean he was a dick about it all the time, but he told them what he would actually think. And that's a lot more honorable than someone who goes around all day lying to people because they're too scared to say what they actually believe. That doesn't make you an ill-tempered jerk.
Big cockeyed imbecile. Tenderheart Bear is a far superior Care Bear to Bedtime Bear.
And he was no stranger to political unrest either. His older brother was executed for plotting to kill the Tsar, and Lenin himself was expelled from university for participating in a student protest. But how did Lenin go from being a middle-class nerd to the arbiter of socialist...
And he was one of the most intelligent people in his university, by the way. He was top of his class.
...divinity? Well, to tell that story, we first need to go back a few decades to when a man named Karl Marx wrote a manifesto explaining how capitalism is a system whereby the stinky...
Yep, that's all he wrote, the manifesto. Ignore capital and the Gundris and theories of surplus value. It's only, 4,000 pages. Just ignore all of that and let's focus on the 30-page party pamphlet, for sure.
Bourgeoisie oppressed and exploited the working masses, and that only through class warfare could the workers rise up and instate a communist utopia. Now go back forward a few decades to Lenin reading that manifesto and loving it. But
Che had that too. He absolutely did. Che Guevara would not conceal what he actually believed. He considered that to be liberalism. He would tell people to their faces, even his friends, even Fidel himself, tell them exactly what he thought. And he wasn't a dick about it, right? And if the party decided to do something different than what he thought, he would follow democratic centralism. But he was open and honest in his debates, which is something Mao talks about in Combat Liberalism, how concealing what you actually believe can lead the party to decay because it allows you to miss things that you should be fixing, or it allows things to continue that are wrong because in order to not offend anybody, you're refusing to point it out. This is why even the executive board of the American Communist Party, we try to be incredibly honest with each other and tell each other when we think that someone's making a mistake.
publicly admitting you loved Marx and not Russia's Big Daddy would get you the cruelest punishment imaginable. Exile to Siberia. Enjoy exile, where you'll live with your wife, chill around town, and secretly write socialist newspapers. Hey, that doesn't sound so bad. And your mother-in-law is going to live with you.
No!
Once Lenin finished his stint in Siberia, he left Russia for Europe, where he was free to hang out with other Russian Marxists and talk about how great communism was. Now today, you might hear the word communism and think of this.
Did they call communism a utopia? I missed it. I didn't realize that, but once again, asking people to read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific and understand how Marx and Engels specifically distinguish themselves from the utopian socialists, who are a much different thing. You just don't understand what you're talking about if you say that. You associate communism with Elon Musk, free healthcare as something scary, public housing, and Bernie Sanders shooting laser out of his eyes. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but that's what I think when I hear the word.
But that's not how intellectuals living under a tough Tsarist regime saw it. To them, communism promised a land where all were equal, where workers weren't exploited, and even people like you could get a girlfriend. So Lenin joined a party of Russian communists living in Europe, and he
Facts. No more incels under communism.
founded a communist newsletter that
Nick Fuentes and all his fans will be forced to go outside.
was smuggled into Russia to try to radicalize the people. However, not everyone in the Socialist Party agreed with Lenin. In fact, they disagreed with him on a lot of issues, and Lenin was so uncompromising that he caused a split in the party. During one conference, a heated debate broke out, and Lenin was unwilling to give an inch. You pig ignorant!
It wasn't just him. And it wasn't him being uncompromising. It was him sticking to the basic principles of Marxism that the Social Democrats were going against, that the Mensheviks were going against. And guess who was proved correct in the end? Guess who the Russian people chose to follow in the end, in the October Revolution, in the second revolution of that year? The Bolsheviks. So Lenin, because of the way that history progressed, was proven right. The whole of Russia got behind the Bolsheviks instead of the Mensheviks. So clearly he was correct to make this split. It wasn't just because he was an asshole. It was because he stood on business. And this is something that's so looked down upon in Western liberal societies, as we've been talking about. right? People who actually stand on principle and stand on business and actually tell you what they think, that's considered bad manners in Western society. It's completely bourgeois and liberal, and this is why Mao talks about it in Combat Liberalism. There's nothing wrong with standing on principle. There's nothing wrong with telling people what you think. Now, that doesn't mean you don't listen to what they think, or you don't take it into account, or you don't have a sort of dialectical back and forth conversation. It doesn't mean you think you're right about everything and never think that you could be wrong. But Lenin was just asserting the basic principles of Marxism, which Kautsky and these other people began to abandon. And of course, he was proven right in the end because the Russian masses chose to follow the Bolsheviks.
Half-witted, fatuous morons!
Cereal is a soup! Listen, Lenin, you're a smart guy, but you have no idea what you're talking about. We're out of here. All in favor
And they were proven wrong.
of cereal being a soup? Hey, would you look at that? We're in the majority. So Lenin set up his own faction within the party he called the majority, or Bolshevik if you're speaking Russian. And the other faction became known as the minority, or Menshevik. And oddly, the majority were often in the minority, and the minority in the majority. The Mensheviks were less radical, whereas Lenin wanted the Bolsheviks to be loyal to him.
The Mensheviks were more rich. They were more intellectuals. They were more pansy asses who weren't willing to do real work on the ground and didn't have the same connection with the working class that the Bolsheviks had. Which is why, when the revolution came, the masses followed the Bolsheviks, because they did have the support of the majority, whereas the Mensheviks didn't.
And his uncompromising ideas. And if you weren't loyal, well then you're gonna get a big brain beatdown. Mensheviks worried that Lenin's attitude could lead to a one-man dictatorship. But come on, does this guy...
They actually show this to kids in school is what hits me. Yeah, it's sad. They show PragerU to kids in schools too. It's like, holy shit, what a miseducation. What a shame that is. Going to school to get educated and then you get shown this.
Guy look like a dictator to you? For now, Lenin remained in Europe, writing his socialist newspaper and impatiently awaiting an opportunity to overthrow the Tsar and bring communist utopia to Russia.
Not a utopia. Engels wrote an entire book on it. Please learn just a little bit. Just to learn the basics before you make a whole video about something, please.
Cool.
And this is the other problem with trying to pump out a bunch of oversimplified history videos on a bunch of different topics. Like pumping out weekly videos, you never actually get to dive deep into those topics. So you're just giving like a Wikipedia version of history about a million different things rather than going in depth about one thing.
The hat. Who the heck are you? I'm definitely not a Russian secret police officer spying on Marxists. Oh crap.
No, there were no secret police officers. Only communism has secret police officers. You're telling me Tsarist Russia had secret police? No way. That's a communist thing.
I don't want secret police watching me. Then you, my friend, should use NordVPN. Do you like having your identity stolen? If yes, you need therapy. If no, you need NordVPN. You can now get now. That's communist. Now where was I? Oh yeah, a timid, easily swayed czar, a massive ill-tempered jerk, impatiently awaiting a communist revolution. And revolution was coming, but not in the way Lenin thought. Back in St. Petersburg, one of the Tsar's most skilled and influential advisors knew the country finally needed to catch up with the rest of Europe. Hey Nick, we really got to industrialize, get more factories, and make some, I don't know, textiles or something. Won't that change the social fabric of Russia? Maybe. Hey, isn't it past your bedtime? But I haven't had my milk and snuggles yet. Will you snuggle me? Nicholas thought modernization was boring, but he let Sergei do his thing. And do his thing he did. He borrowed some money and got Russia some sexy factories. And you know what sexy factories means. Sexy workers. Dirt poor, sexy workers.
Again, brought about by class struggle and the advancement of the productive forces in general, which made industrialization a possibility, but brought upon by the public consciousness at the time and the public outcry against feudalism at the time, not something that this great leader just decided. It was something that was pushed upon him by the material conditions and by the state of the class struggle in feudal Russia.
Workers. Long hours, low wages, filthy disease-ridden factories, sleep in overcrowded dormitories with all your stinky worker friends, get your arms ripped off in a freak Russian doll accident. Conditions were terrible. But this growing working class wasn't about to take it lying down. They started to do what workers...
And by instituting more capitalism, they created a proletariat. They created these angry workers who were willing to fight with the Bolsheviks against those conditions. And the proletariat ended up being, even though it was a minority class at the time in Russia, they had more peasants. The proletariat, and this was the Bolsheviks' theory, were at the lead of the revolution with the support of the peasants, who were almost like secondary forces. So this is Lenin's theory of the worker-peasant alliance. The proletariat leads and the peasants serve as an ally. And by instituting more industrialization, the czars actually helped create this proletarian class, which would then be the leading class in the revolutionary struggle. So I don't know what he means by, this isn't the way Lenin thought it would happen. This was exactly what Lenin thought, that the development of capitalism would make the conditions ripe for revolution, because it would create this disenfranchised proletariat, which is the revolutionary agent of history, the revolutionary agent within capitalist society. And then he called for an alliance between the peasants and the newly sort of developing proletariat in semi-feudal Russia. And that is exactly what happened. Right? The proletariat led the revolution, or the Bolsheviks led the revolution with the proletariat at the front and with the support of the peasants. So far, his thing about the Bolsheviks being the minority, bullshit, and his thing about the revolution not happening how Lenin thought it would, also bullshit. I mean, of course, nobody can predict the future, and Lenin himself, as time passed, he would change his thoughts and say, okay, here are the new conditions. Here's what we have to do now. Things have changed. So he didn't lay out exactly how it would happen step by step. But in terms of having a correct theory, he was more correct than almost anybody in history. He predicted what happened in his country better than almost any theorist in all of human history, really.
Do best. Strike. Despite Sergei's efforts, people in Russia still weren't happy. Peasants were still poor, liberals still wanted reform, and now the workers wanted better working conditions. And the problem with being an autocrat is that when everyone's unhappy, there's only one person to blame. You. The people hate me. What do I do? Ooh, I know. Why don't we find a weak and pathetic nation to go to war with? We'll win easily, and everyone will love me again. Why don't we just try treating the people better? As luck would have it, an opportunity for war was forming in the Far East. Russia wanted to expand its sphere of influence into northern China, and coincidentally, so did Japan. But Japan didn't really want war, so they proposed an idea to reduce the tension.
So stupid, man. They're so stupid. And you think, how can anyone be this stupid? When your people are ready to revolt against you, how could you send them to endless stupid wars of expansion? But look at what the U.S. is doing now. They can't stop themselves. They can't help themselves. They can't do anything except imperialist expansion. They can't do anything except what they know. Right now, trying to maintain U.S. global hegemony, but back then, trying to maintain the Russian Empire and expand it, as opposed to other empires like the British Empire and the French and Portugal and all these other countries who were fighting for territories at the time. Before World War II, you had a bunch of different competing imperialist powers. After World War II, the U.S. emerged as the dominant imperialist power. It's like, how could any leadership, how could any ruling class be so stupid to keep spending money on endless wars when the people are ready for a revolt? Look at America, man. The ruling class does what they know. They follow what the system has taught them.
Hey man, we'll let you do your thing in Manchuria if you let us do our thing in Korea. I don't think so. We've got the largest army in the world. What do you have? I'm the Emperor of Japan. I have a giant mecha suit. Whoa. Cool. Nicholas and the boys didn't see Japan as a threat, so they felt they could push Japan around. But little did they know Japan had been rapidly militarizing, and when they launched a surprise attack on a Russian fleet at Port Arthur, everyone was shocked. Nicholas hoped it was an opportunity to win a quick war and regain the support of the people. Nobody seriously thought a puny Asian country could defeat a European superpower, and the Russian people were filled with patriotic spunk. Hey everyone, we're at war with Japan! Hey everyone, we're losing the war. The Japanese won, an embarrassing defeat for Tsar Nicholas. Russia had enough problems, but now it had been internationally humiliated. The public were outraged. Unrest increased. Nicholas needed snuggles now more than ever. The tension was rising rapidly, and Russia was on the verge of revolution. All it needed was one disaster to push it over the edge, and that disaster would come in January 1905 from an unlikely source, a handsome Orthodox priest named Father Gapon. Father Gapon was leading workers and their families to the Winter Palace, but this wasn't some violent uprising. It was a peaceful protest. They wanted to deliver a petition to Nicholas, which simply asked for more.
No mention of Rasputin yet, by the way. I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure they'll make him a main character at the end of this one or in part 2.
Freedom and better working conditions. The protest was actually so peaceful and respectful that the Marxists thought it was a big waste of time. Hey Nicholas, some priest is leading a peaceful protest. Says here they want to give you a petition. A peaceful petitioning priest? I better get out of here. Nicholas had actually left the Winter Palace days earlier, and in his place they brought in a truckload of troops, ordered to stop Father Gapon from reaching the palace. Hello, good sir, and long live the Tsar. Please, allow me to pass this simple petition to our dear father, Nicholas II. Good day to you too. Please, allow us to respond by opening fire. What began as a peaceful protest ended in tragedy. Imperial soldiers opened fire on the crowd. Around 200 civilians died, 800 more were wounded. All they wanted was the opportunity to ask Nicholas to improve their lives. Instead, they were met with bullets. Nicholas didn't personally order the troops to fire.
And again, this is how we see the ruling class responding to protests today. Peaceful Palestine encampments, peaceful protests being violently broken up by police, being tear gassed, being forced out by police with riot shields. This is very common, this overreaction, this asserting of state authority that only serves to piss people off more. But nowadays, we're like more used to it. It's become like a daily occurrence that the police are beating up protesters somewhere.
Fire. But as an autocrat, he got the blame. The event became known as Bloody Sunday, and Nicholas's reputation plummeted. Strikes erupted across the empire. Workers' demands increased. Liberals demanded political power. Peasants demanded land. The country was out of control, and the 1905 revolution had begun. Listen, Nicholas, peasants seizing my land and murdering my family I can tolerate, but illegally chopping my wood? That's obscene. And the worse I treat my workers, the more they strike. I don't get it. Everyone relax. As long as the military is still on my side, there's nothing to worry about. Sir, the sailor...
That sums up the capitalist mindset right there. The worse I treat my workers, the more they strike. I don't get it. They're so ungrateful. Don't they know that without me, they would starve? Don't they know that without me hoarding all of the resources and giving them a tiny fraction of what they produce, they would starve? Why aren't they grateful to me? Me. Most narcissistic class of people that's ever existed, the bourgeoisie. The most individualistic, narcissistic possible. And they run our whole society.
Sailors are starting to mutiny. Well, my life just sucks. With Russia still losing to the Japanese, unrest was growing in the military, and some sailors had even taken to killing officers. Having the people against you was bad enough, but if the military joined in, it would be game over. To make
And this is where, you know how leftists sometimes say we shouldn't recruit anyone in the military? Everyone who joins the military is reactionary. Like, I get it. Yeah, they're serving imperialism, whatever. A lot of them were preyed on by recruiters when they were 18 and in poverty and had no idea about politics or world events or history or anything, which is more the fault of our education system and how the military preys on impoverished kids more than anything, more than you can blame the individual. But either way, every successful revolution has the military turn on the state. There have been socialist revolutions like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela that was just, he was a colonel or whatever in the Venezuelan military. And they attempted a military coup. There was a military coup in Peru that was very progressive. There was a military coup recently in Niger, Mali, and of course Burkina Faso with Ibrahim Traore that have been wildly progressive, that have basically enacted socialist governments and kicked out all the Western imperialists. So realistically, strategically, to have a successful revolution, you have to win over huge sections of the military. You have to win over huge sections of the armed forces. People will also say a revolution's impossible. The military would just come quash it, right? Well, that's not how revolutions happen historically. Revolutions have been quashed historically like that, but when they've been successful, large swaths of military-age men and members of the military themselves have been turned to the side of the revolutionary forces, have been turned against the state, giving them orders once they recognize that these orders are bullshit, that they were sent to Iraq to fight for oil, or that they were sent to China to fight for Tsarist imperialist expansion. So we absolutely, as the ACP, have to reach members of the military. We absolutely have to educate members of the military. We absolutely can't cancel them and say, no, you're evil and bad, and I'm making a moral judgment of you that prevents you from being a part of the communist movement because you were in an imperialist military. No, we have to show them the truth, show them the reality of the imperialist machinery, and not all of them will accept it, but some will. Nobody hates the military more than military members, especially those people who were preyed upon by recruiters when they were 18, got deployed to Syria or Afghanistan or some horrible war zone.
Matters worse. In October, workers and Marxists, including one Leon Trotsky, began setting up local elected councils called Soviets that coordinated strikes and supplied the workers. Sergei could see the writing on the wall. Things were going south fast, and he needed a big idea to save the Tsar. And luckily, he had just that. You see, all these angry people from different parts of society weren't really working together, meaning there was a weakness to exploit. Sergei wrote a manifesto that would give the liberals an elected assembly called the Duma. It took some convincing, but eventually, Nicholas agreed to share power and have his laws approved by an elected assembly. Hey, liberals, here's your stupid manifesto. Happy now? We certainly are. But what about these guys? Aren't you going to give them what they want? Oh, goodness no. I was just going to kill them. With the liberals satisfied, and after ending the war with Japan, the Tsar brought thousands of troops home, who then dismantled the Soviets, arrested their leaders, and crushed the peasant uprisings in the countryside. And how about that pesky parliament Nicholas had agreed to share power with? Well, he then wrote a bunch of new laws, which basically said, hey, remember that manifesto I wrote and how you guys were going to approve my laws? Slight change of plan. Actually, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want.
Again, the Tsar is being forced to give lip service to changing the system. by class struggle and by the material conditions, but never actually making real substantive change. And this is what people point to and say, oh, the czars did all of the good stuff. It all happened before Lenin and Stalin. No. The people wanted what Lenin and Stalin actually did, what Lenin and Stalin actually did concretely. So the czar promised to do those things, but never actually did them.
And you guys are going to shut up. What? The people won't stand for this. People? What people? You know, this is why people don't like you. And just like that, Nicholas had survived the 1905 revolution. But wait, a revolution? In Russia? Where was Lenin? Well, Lenin and his communist pals were still in exile. He tried desperately to radicalize the uprising, but all he could do was watch. As the movements failed to organize, the liberals sold out the poor, and the Tsar outplayed the people. Furious.
Sounds about right, huh? That's actually another accurate representation of the 1905 revolution. The liberals sold out the people to make an alliance with the monarchs. Sounds about right, huh, folks?
He believed Russia had missed a great chance for a real revolution. From now on, he felt the only way left was an armed revolution by the workers. Watching the events of 1905 unfold, Lenin learned a lot. The Tsar, however, would prove to have learned nothing. After the 1905 revolution had failed, the Tsar's new top man was Pyotr Stolypin, and he had big ideas.
That's what I mean by Lenin was always changing his theory based upon new events. He learned so much from the 1905 revolution, the same way that Marx learned a ton from the failure of the Paris Commune, and Lenin in State and Revolution deeply analyzes and dissects Marx's analysis of the Paris Commune. So, you know, when there's a revolutionary uprising, we have to learn from it. Even in the U.S., right? We have to learn from the 2008 Occupy Wall Street protests and why they failed to do anything. I don't know if it was 2008. Maybe it started in 2008. I think it did with the crash. But anyways, we have to learn from that. We have to learn from the BLM protests and how all these uprisings were completely liberalized and the more radical leaders were taken out or imprisoned and replaced with neoliberals. These are things that we have to learn from in America, because these are genuine uprisings of the people that the communists have failed to give structure and direction to. So we have to learn from these, educate people so that the next, you know, genuine sort of naturally occurring uprising can be more scientific and more based in theory and have more direction and strategy to it based upon the failures of the past.
Ideas to prevent any more chaos. Step 1, reform agriculture. This will make the peasants love you.
Occupy was 2011. Okay, that I thought so. I thought I might have been wrong about 2008. Yeah, good call.
Step 2, we'll kill anyone who doesn't. To discourage any more revolutionary ideas, Stolypin began to crack down even harder on the Tsar's opponents, and thousands were sentenced to death. The noose even earned itself a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie. I don't get it. Oh, I see.
It was after the recovery failed to reach working class people. Got you. Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't politically active at the time. I was in like middle school, so I'm not super clear about the actual timeline. But
it goes around.
Maybe I need to study it deeper so we can learn the lessons of the Occupy Wall Street protest.
My neck. That's so funny. But despite the oppression, many positive reforms were also being made, and the Russian economy even began to improve. This was a problem for Lenin. If the people weren't suffering, then they wouldn't support a revolution. Still in exile and lacking funds, the Bolsheviks simply weren't in a position to do anything. Luckily, it was around this time that Lenin met an incredibly handsome Georgian with his second favorite historical mustache, Joseph Stalin. Lenin and
Based!
Stalin met at a communist convention in Finland, and Lenin liked Stalin because he was a real go-getter and was great at fundraising for the Bolsheviks. And by fundraising, I mean kidnapping, robbing, extorting, bribing, ransoming, assassinating, prison breaking, stealing, bank raiding, executioning, and stealing again. He's Stalin. The Mensheviks aren't so hot in all this stealing, but
he robbed banks. He was like Robin Hood. He robbed the rich people who were robbing the country blind. He wasn't just robbing and extorting random people. Come on now. You got to ask which class was being robbed and at the benefit of which class.
We still need money, so the next time you do a big heist, just do it quietly. Okay, quietly. Got it. If this isn't quiet, I don't know what is. Stalin's wacky antics eventually got him exiled to Siberia, but he had established himself as a big balls Bolshevik. However, no amount of Bolshevik balls could stop what was happening. The Russian economy was making a recovery. For the Tsar, things were looking up. This is great. All Nicholas has to do is sit back and not mess anything up. Hey everyone, big news. I'd like to introduce you to my new best friend. He's a crazy, drunken, beardy, horny scam.
Yeah, it showed Stalin kidnapping a child. Where's the historical evidence for that? All I know is that he was robbing banks and robbing the rich like a badass. Oh, here comes Rasputin. Finally, we get the man himself. Probably the most famous person in the entire Western world when it comes to this period of history in the Russian Revolution. More Americans probably know Rasputin than they know Lenin.
Scandal-ridden magic wizard man, and he smells
Definitely more Americans know Rasputin than they know the Tsar family. Any of them.
a goat. were screwed. Rasputin, a dirt poor peasant from dirt poor nowhere. But unlike all the other dirt poor peasants, Rasputin had holy healing powers. And when this holy mystic wandered into St. Petersburg, people began to notice. He quickly became famous, and word of this mystery man and his healing hands made its way to the royal palace. The appearance of a holy homeless healer was of great interest to the Tsar and his wife. As far as royals go, they weren't that inbred, but they were just inbred enough for their son Alexei to get hemophilia, or in layman's terms, Mamma mia, that's a lot of blood. Knowing Rasputin could heal people, in 1906, Alexander asked for Rasputin to come and see if he could cure their son. And crazy as it sounds, Rasputin did heal Alexei, possibly by taking him off his doctor-prescribed aspirin. Having seemingly done the impossible, Rasputin became very, very close to the royal family. But having a crazy homeless wizard man hanging around wasn't a good look for the Tsar, because
were they doing some polyamorous stuff? I know that's been suspected forever, but every ruling class of any system gets into some weird stuff. You know, they're just partying it up at the top. They don't have any actual real worries or concerns. They're living off the backs of everyone else in a super exploitative way, oppressing everyone else. It's like when you fall into that kind of evil, it's like sexual degeneracy and stuff is just right around the corner. Just look at Jeffrey Epstein and all the rich American and European imperialists who have been engaging in that kind of absolutely sick, bottom of the barrel, degenerate behavior. It's not that hard to think that, you know, maybe the Tsar had an open relationship going on.
Rasputin was freaky. Not only was he a big fan of alcohol, but he'd also throw these crazy parties with Russian nobility where he'd and all night long, and then he'd his whole head, not a guy's, and nobody knew how the goat got on the roof. Initially, the press were banned from talking about Rasputin, but eventually, the ban was lifted, and the tabloids went to town. The whole thing was a huge scandal, and everyone was freaked out that this guy was influencing the Tsar and his wife. Nicholas could have spent this period of relative peace improving his image. Instead, he spent it doing this. But as weird as the whole Rasputin thing was, so long as the economy continued to improve, and people's lives
There was a situation like this in South Korea recently, where like South Korea had this leader who kind of instituted more central economic planning and helped industrialize and develop the country, and it pissed the US off. The US like didn't try to, I don't know if they overtly tried to coup them or whatever, and they were obviously still allies of South Korea because they prefer them to the DPRK. But this guy, you know, instituted a lot of socialist style central economic planning and helped develop the industry in South Korea. And then it turned out that he was being advised the whole time by like this cult leader guy. And then the leader of South Korea, his daughter ended up taking over the country later, and the weird cult leader guy said, my son is going to advise your daughter as well, right? Like my children will advise your children, and they'll have the same relationship that we did. And eventually this went public. The South Korean people found out that they were, you know, their economic policy was being devised by this weird cult leader guy, and their politics were being guided by that guy and his weird prophecy for his children to run the country. And it became a huge scandal. And I believe the president was impeached. I can't think of the people's names. There are people who could explain that way better than me, but almost like a modern Rasputin situation.
Kept getting better, maybe Nick would be okay. Maybe there would be no more revolutions. Maybe this video could even end right here. Or maybe things were about to get worse. A lot worse.
They say he slept with the wife, but maybe he got a little action with the husband too. You never know.
You see, the year is 1914, and that means it's time for World War I.
That's a good place to cut off. There you go, folks. Next week, we'll be reacting to part 2 of the Russian Revolution Oversimplified. That one wasn't too bad, actually. That was one of the better oversimplified videos I've seen. Like I said, there are a lot of people whose analysis in the lead up to the Russian Revolution is pretty good. They recognize that the czars were autocratic and the country was impoverished and it was a just revolution against oppressive forces. But then they say, you know, after the revolution, everything went to shit. Stalin was evil. Lenin became evil, blah, 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 blah. All this bullshit. So that seems to be this video. They seem to have a decent analysis of the lead up to the revolution and a decent analysis of feudal Russia. But in the next episode, I imagine I'll be pausing every 5 seconds to debunk some nonsense that they say, because they're going to start trying to demonize Lenin, Stalin, and the Bolsheviks who led the revolution against those admittedly oppressive forces. So I'm sure there will be more substance to my criticisms in part 2. Part 1 wasn't actually that bad. A few things to criticize, a few things they got wrong, but not too bad. So I'm excited for part 2. Hopefully people enjoyed that one. And yeah, keep debunking these YouTube history videos that are full of shit.